It's 7 p.m. Friday, October 18th, here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon is expected to deliver a letter from President Moon Jae-in to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe when he makes a visit to Japan next week. Lee and Abe are also likely to hold a brief one-on-one to discuss ways to repair strained South Korea-Japan relations.
President Moon hosts foreign diplomats based in Seoul at the Blue House, calling for their support for his peace drive on the Korean Peninsula, as well as next month's South Korea-ASEAN summit.
China's economy in the third quarter grows at its slowest pace since the 1990s as its trade war with the U.S. takes its toll.
And Japan's poor management of radioactive waste from Japan's crippled Fukushima nuclear plant is under fire once again as bags containing the waste were found empty soon after the recent typhoon Hagibis reportedly swept them away. NEWSCENTER begins now. Good evening and welcome to Arirang NEWSCENTER, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Arirang.
And I'm Han-dan. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin with some possible moves that could open the way for South Korea and Japan to mend their frayed ties. The South Korean Prime Minister is going to Tokyo next week for the Emperor's enthronement ceremony.
And while he's there, he could hand over a friendly letter from President Moon Jae-in to the Japanese Prime Minister if they meet next Thursday. Shin Se-min has our top story.
Perhaps a friendly letter from South Korean President Moon Jae-in to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, helping to defrost the bilateral relations between the two countries. South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon says that he has requested a letter from Moon so he can deliver the message to the Japanese leader when he visits Tokyo next week to attend the enthronement ceremony of the Emperor Naruhito on October 22nd. In an interview with Japan's Kyodo News on Friday, Prime Minister Lee said he is keen to be messenger between the two leaders, adding that he will listen to Abe's words sincerely and do his best to explain the thoughts of President Moon and himself. An official at the top office, in regards to the PM's interview, said it's difficult to say whether a letter is being prepared, but said such discussions between the president and the prime minister had in fact taken place. As for his visit to Japan, Lee said he hopes the two leaders can resolve the matters between the two sides as historic obligations and added that it will not take long to solve the bilateral friction, given that the leaders both appear to have a strong will to do so before the end of their terms. Also speaking to Asahi Shimbun, the prime minister said if Japan rolls back its trade restrictions against South Korea, then the two sides can review the possibility of Seoul rejoining its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan, and added that all of this is possible if the two sides make a real effort. South Korea's Prime Minister's office confirmed on Friday that the one-on-one meeting between PMs Lee and Abe will be on October 24th, but the duration of that meeting is still unknown. And that meeting, although expected to be a brief encounter, will be the highest-level meeting between the two neighboring countries since their relations tanked to their lowest level in decades. Topping the agenda for the talks may be Japan's export curbs, which are seen as political retaliation for a South Korean top court's ruling last year that ordered Japanese firms to compensate victims of Tokyo's wartime forced labor in the 1940s. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And South Korean Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon will meet with Lotte Group Chairman Shin Dong-bin as he seeks to exchange views on Seoul-Tokyo relations. A closed-door dinner is set for this evening ahead of the Prime Minister's visit to Japan next week. Lee will be in Tokyo to attend the Japanese Emperor's enthronement ceremony and will also sit down for talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Chairman Shin is known for his extensive network of Japanese business and political figures, as Lotte was founded in Japan in 1948 before growing into one of South Korea's top conglomerates. President Moon Jae-in met with foreign diplomats based in Seoul at the Blue House this afternoon. He asked for their support for his peace drive on the Korean Peninsula and also for the South Korea-ASEAN Special Summit coming up in November. At the meeting were around 200 ambassadors and representatives from international organizations, marking the first time President Moon has invited all the diplomats at once. Previous administrations also held such meetings, but because of President Moon's busy schedule and overseas trips, the meeting was delayed. Japanese Ambassador Yasumasa Nagamine was also there. But President Moon did not hold separate talks with him or address Seoul-Tokyo relations today. South Korea's National Security Council has agreed to take a phased approach to transforming the DMZ into a global peace zone, a vision laid out by President Moon in his UN General Assembly speech last month. At a meeting Friday of the NSC's Standing Committee led by National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong, they agreed to begin with practical steps that can be carried out in the early stages. Members also reviewed the progress so far in negotiations with Washington about how much Korea will pay for the U.S. troops stationed in Korea, with the two sides set to hold talks in Hawaii next week. The NSC will also continue to work closely with the U.S. and the international community for the early resumption of talks between North Korea and the U.S. to achieve denuclearization. For the seventh month in a row, a report from the Finance Ministry has described the South Korean economy as stagnant, with a weak outlook for investment and exports. Hong Yu with the details.
Production growth has continued, but exports and investment have been sluggish. With that evaluation, the Finance Ministry concluded in its Green Book report on Friday that the economy is still stagnant for the seventh month in a row. This is due to a shrinking of the global manufacturing industry and global trade, which is slowing global economic growth and dragging the semiconductor business into a slump. The ministry also cited Japan's export curbs on South Korea and the U.S.-China trade dispute. Exports have been in decline for 10 consecutive months since last December. Exports for the month of September alone saw a decrease of 11.7% on year, with $44.7 billion of exports. There were more outbound shipments of cars and vessels, but other products such as semiconductors and petroleum products were exported less, mainly to countries such as China and the Middle East. But production continues to grow in the service sector, with the month of August seeing a 0.5% production increase on month. Consumer prices in September fell by 0.4%, the first drop seen since 1965. The ministry says it was due to the dragging slump in price of agricultural and petroleum products and a base effect. Employment figures for September showed a brighter picture for job seekers for the second month in a row, and the unemployment rate was 3.1%, the lowest for the month in 5 years. The ministry says it will accelerate fiscal measures and use policies to support the revitalization of investment, domestic demand, and exports, while making full efforts to manage risks such as responding to Japan's export regulations. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
China's economy in the third quarter grew at its slowest pace in 27 years. Government figures show the economy grew 6% on year, slightly down from the previous quarter. Although the agency did not give reasons for the slowdown, experts say it's likely China is feeling the heat from its trade war with the U.S. South Korea and the U.S. have signed an MOU to better enable investors in both countries to work together on financing infrastructure and energy projects. Seoul's Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki signed it on Thursday in Washington with his American counterpart, Stephen Mnuchin. Kim Hye-sung reports.
South Korea and the United States signed a memorandum of understanding in Washington on Thursday to strengthen financing for energy and infrastructure projects. It's the first MOU signed between the finance ministries of the two countries, with both saying it reaffirms the strong relationship between Seoul and Washington. South Korea's Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said the agreement is expected to support infrastructure development in Latin America and Southeast Asia through private investment, and the working groups on the matter will begin work soon. He added the MOU is expected to scale growth opportunities for both countries as it supports Korea's new northern policy in Southeast Asia and Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy. Minister Hong also addressed the issue of Iran sanctions and the need for a swift resolution to Japan's export curbs on South Korea, saying it could disrupt the global value chain and hurt global growth. While expressing hope Seoul and Tokyo's economic cooperative relationship can be brought back on track soon, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin also highly assessed Seoul's efforts for a transparent foreign exchange policy. South Korea is currently listed on the U.S. Treasury Department's currency manipulation monitoring list. The U.S. is due to release its biannual foreign exchange report later this month. Minister Hong also called for an exemption from possible tariffs on South Korea's auto exports to the U.S. President Trump is expected to decide whether to impose tariffs on imported automobiles from South Korea, Japan, the EU, and others by the end of next month. 김혜성, 아리랑 뉴스.
It's been reported that when Typhoon Hagibis hit Japan last weekend, radioactive waste did indeed go missing. The bags that had contained the waste were washed away and have now been found empty. Our Choi Jong-yoon has more.
Japanese media report that traces of radioactive wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant have been found in various places following the season's strongest typhoon Hagibis. The Tokyo Shimbun reported Friday that 10 bags that had contained radioactive waste were found empty along the Furumichi River, indicating that the contents had spilled out. Those are understood to be some of the bags that the nearby city of Tamura said earlier this week were swept away by the storm's heavy rain. Meanwhile, 2 other villages in Fukushima Prefecture, Kawachi and Niumatsu, say they found a total of 33 bags downstream, and 2 of them were empty. The Japanese government had collected about 30 million tons of radioactive debris after the nuclear disaster in March 2011. The Tokyo Shimbun also pointed out that the authorities had not managed the nuclear waste facilities properly. According to local media, 4 of the temporary storage units in Gunma and Fukushima prefectures have been made inaccessible because of landslides and floods, so workers cannot even inspect them. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. In 2015, around 240 bags of contaminated waste from the Fukushima plant went missing in similar circumstances when the region was hit by torrential rain. Choi Jong-yoon, Arirang News.
Japan has reportedly decided to dispatch its self-defense forces to the Strait of Hormuz to protect shipments of oil passing through the area. But it's sending its forces separately and not as part of the U.S. coalition which it had been asked to join. Our Kim Mo-kyun has this report.
In a brief breaking report on Friday, Japan's Asahi Shimbun said Tokyo had decided to send its own troops to the Strait of Hormuz instead of joining the U.S.-led coalition tasked with safeguarding commercial shipping in the Middle East. It said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe told his ministers in a National Security Council meeting to review the mission specifics. It also said that because Abe had visited Iran in June, possibly to serve as a mediator between Iran and the U.S., this could be a move to avoid clashing with Iran and at the same time stay on board with Washington's plan for the defense shipping. The Strait of Hormuz is a crucial area in terms of international trade because it's the route taken to transport 20% of the world's petroleum. Washington has been pushing a plan to increase patrols in the area through a multinational coalition following a series of attacks on international oil tankers, which it blames on Iran. Those joining the coalition include Saudi Arabia, Britain, the UAE, Australia, and Bahrain. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense minister was in the hot seat for today's parliamentary audit, addressing challenges facing the military as well as possible changes slated for next year. Kim Ji-yeon with the details.
During a parliamentary audit on Friday, Seoul's defense minister Chung Kyung-do pledged to make efforts to clinch a win-win deal in determining next year's costs to station U.S. troops in South Korea, in which another round of talks are scheduled for next week in Hawaii.
We're sparing no effort to realize the government's Defense Reform 2.0 scheme to build a new and stronger military that is better prepared to effectively confront an array of security threats and procure strategic deterrence capabilities.
As part of efforts to carry out its Defense Reform 2.0 scheme, the South Korean Army said it'll reduce the number of soldiers dispatched to the Korean augmentation to the United States Army, or KATUSA, to some 2,600 by 2022, from the current 3,500 troops. The move is also seen as part of efforts by the U.S. forces to scale down the number of troops in the country, as stated by former commander of U.S. Forces Korea General Vincent Brooks earlier this week, which he stated is instead being improved through specialization. The Defense Ministry said it'll increase facilities and investigative units tasked with sexual abuse probes. The ministry will also ban the Defense Security Support Command from conducting surveillance on private citizens, an issue that put its predecessor in hot water for masterminding a covert operation to post online comments to interfere in local politics. The ministry also urged for an amendment of the military's penalty policy, which is currently tied up at the National Assembly, that aims at excluding imprisonment. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Former U.S. nuclear envoy Joseph Yoon says an interim deal should be reached between Pyongyang and Washington to move forward with denuclearization. If they do reach a deal, he says, where the North does more than dismantle a key nuclear facility in exchange for the U.S. giving partial sanctions relief, then a third summit between Kim and Trump could happen in the next 6 months. Oh Jung-hee reports.
In an interview with Seoul-based Sinop news agency, Joseph Yoon, former U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, said U.S. President Donald Trump won't be having a third summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un unless there's an agreement beforehand. Yoon said there needs to be a midway deal where Pyongyang does more than just dismantle its nuclear facilities at Yongbyon. In addition to the Dongchangri missile engine test site and the Punggye-ri nuclear test site, the former diplomat said the North should offer a roadmap that lays out detailed steps to complete denuclearization. In return for these, Washington should provide some sanctions relief, for example, by allowing some coal exports or some North Korean workers to earn currency overseas. Yoon said some good additions could also be a declaration of the end of the war and an exchange of liaison offices. He thinks a third summit between Kim and Trump is possible within the next 6 months because Trump would want to reach a deal with North Korea a year before the next election, and North Korea has said it expects a new calculation from Washington by the end of the year. He added, like John Bolton, he believes North Korea won't denuclearize in the near future. But forcefully taking nuclear weapons out of the regime would trigger a war, and therefore, there has to be a step-by-step process that builds trust along the way. Meanwhile, it appears the Punggye-ri nuclear test site, which the North showed the world last year as it was being blown up, is still potentially usable. According to the U.S. think tank CSIS, the North is not currently working to restore the nuclear test portals, but the facility is not permanently disabled, and the damage done to them is not necessarily irreversible. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
More shelling and gunfire were heard in northeast Syria on Friday, just hours after Turkey had agreed to a 5-day pause in military operations there to allow Kurdish forces to move out of the area. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
The sound of gunfire and shelling was heard around the northeast Syrian town of Ras al-Ain on Friday. Reuters reported that smoke rose from the town, but it is still unclear what damage was caused by the shelling. This comes just 13 hours after U.S. and Turkey have agreed to a 5-day pause in Turkey's military operation in northeast Syria to allow for the withdrawal of Kurdish forces. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence revealed the news of that pause after talks in Ankara on Thursday local time.
It will be a pause in military operations for 120 hours while the United States facilitates the withdrawal of YPG from the affected areas in the safe zone.
He said the Kurds will move out of the safe zone over the 5 days, and Turkey's Operation Peace Spring will be halted entirely on the completion of the withdrawal, adding that Washington and Ankara are mutually committed to a peaceful resolution and the future for the safe zone. The temporary pause in Turkey was praised by President Donald Trump, who said it would save millions of lives. However, reports say it is unclear whether the Kurdish-led forces would fully comply with the agreement. CNN also quoted James Jeffrey, U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, saying Turkey does not use the word ceasefire because the agreement of the pause of Turkey's military operation will be focused on areas that Turkey had already moved into. Meanwhile, all U.S. forces in northern Syria are still withdrawing from the area, meaning there will be no monitoring of the 5-day ceasefire. Russian troops will take their place, but stateless Kurds still remain in danger. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Turning to Brexit now, and Britain and the EU have agreed to new terms for the UK to exit the bloc, paving the way for a blockbuster vote in the British Parliament on Saturday. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The leaders of the United Kingdom and the European Union on Thursday unanimously endorsed a new Brexit divorce deal ahead of the October 31st deadline for Britain to leave the EU. Speaking at a news conference in Brussels, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson stressed the importance of the deal and what it would mean for both the UK and the EU.
I want to stress that this is a great deal for our country, for the UK. I also believe it's a very good deal for our friends in the EU. And what it means is that we in the UK can come out of the EU as one united kingdom. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland together. And it means we can decide our future together. We can decide, we can take back control, as the phrase goes, of our money, our borders, our laws together. And we will be able to do free trade agreements around the world.
However, getting the necessary votes at home will be a tall task for the Prime Minister, who was one of the faces of the 2016 campaign to leave the EU. Johnson brushed off suggestions that he won't be able to persuade enough lawmakers to pass the deal this weekend after his allies in Parliament, Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, rejected the deal. Despite having to overcome that hurdle, the Prime Minister said he was feeling positive.
And I'm very confident that when my colleagues in Parliament study this agreement, that they will want to vote for it on Saturday and then in succeeding days.
European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker also insisted a deal must be made and that there would be no further extension.
I hope it will. I'm convinced it will. But it has to.
It has to, but if it doesn't?
Anyway, there will be no prolongation.
There will be no...
Johnson and his team hope the threat of Britain leaving without a deal on its October 31st deadline will concentrate minds in Parliament, which has rejected agreements negotiated by his predecessor, Theresa May, 3 times, which ultimately forced her to resign earlier this year. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Great news for all those BTS fans around the world. Just an hour ago, the Korean boy band BTS released a new song featuring a famous American singer. And this morning, the group's official pop-up store, House of BTS, opened its doors in the heart of Gangnam. Our Won Jung-hwan tells us more.
It's official, BTS and Lauv have teamed up for their next mega hit song. The song, which is a remix of the BTS track Make It Right from the album Map of Seoul, Persona, was just released on Friday at 6 p.m. Korean time through major online music distributors both in Korea and overseas. The original song was released back in April of this year and peaked at number 95 on the Hot 100 Billboard chart on April 27th. Fans around the world can expect some new lyrics and vocals on the original version, as American singer-songwriter and producer Lauv wrote some of the new lines and contributed a layer of his delicate and soft voice. BTS has also unveiled a new music video for the song, a montage of clips featuring performances of Make It Right during the group's recent world tour. This single will be the group's 5th collaboration this year alone, following their hit songs featuring Zara Larsson and Steve Aoki. Meanwhile, on the same day at 10 a.m., BTS officially opened their pop-up store in Seoul's Gangnam district. The House of BTS, colored in pink, has taken over an entire 4-floor building. Inside, visitors can experience the virtual world within BTS's music videos, buy BTS merchandise, food and drinks, and listen to new remixes of their hit tunes. Before coming to Korea, the pop-up store was set up in cities in the US and the UK in conjunction with the band's world tour. The Seoul pop-up store is regarded as an upgraded version of the previous ones, and it will operate for 80 days, running until January 5th. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
Samsung is working on a fix for its Galaxy 10 series of smartphones after it was found that anyone's fingerprint can be used to unlock the devices if a certain kind of screen protector is used. Our Ji-young has more.
The new biometric authentication system used by Samsung's latest Galaxy S10 and Galaxy Note 10 might have a critical flaw. The devices have an ultrasonic in-display fingerprint sensor that is supposed to keep them secure. However, there are claims that if a device is fitted with a screen protector, it is unable to discriminate between different fingerprints. The problem was first discovered by a UK couple when the husband was able to unlock the wife's phone with his fingerprint, according to a report by UK newspaper The Sun. The couple told The Sun that it was a real concern as the same thing happened when the screen protector was added to another relative's phone. Apparently, when a particular silicone cover screen protector, which costs about $3 is applied to the phone, it can fool the fingerprint sensor. This can lead to anybody's fingers being able to bypass what Samsung had called a revolutionary authentication system. This issue raises security worries for millions of users worldwide because if Samsung's fingerprint ID system is enabled, it not only allows users to open their phones and access information, but also make payments through banking apps on the phone with their fingerprints. Samsung acknowledged the problem and said in a statement that it is working to fix the problem. It promised to come up with a software patch soon to fix the problem and advised customers to only use official Samsung screen protectors. There have been previous reports that suggest some screen covers are not compatible with Samsung sensor because they leave a small air gap that interferes with the scanning. Ji-young, Arirang News.
The pleasant autumn weather in Korea these days has people heading outdoors. If you're in the country and planning your weekend, you might want to pay close attention to our next report. Here's our Kim Bo-kyung.
The leaves have already changed color on several mountains around Korea. Seoraksan and Odaesan mountains will see leaves reach their peak autumn colors this weekend, and mountains near the capital will be the most beautiful next week, followed by southern regions such as Hallasan Mountain on Jeju Island reaching their peak in early November. But as well as enjoying the red and orange autumn leaves on the mountains, there are plenty of other places where people can enjoy the autumn weather. One such place is Haneul Park, located at the highest point of World Cup Park in western Seoul. With the Seoul Silvergrass Festival kicking off on Friday, Haneul Park is packed with people taking in the calm autumn breeze and vividly colored plants. The vast expanse of grass that's peppered with tall silvergrass attracts plenty of couples.
We came up to Seoul for the first time from Masan. We came here by chance and it's really nice.
The silvergrass is not the only attraction to catch your eye at Haneul Park. Two other popular plants in this park are the pink muhly grass, which has an attractive soft pink color, and broom cypress, a small rounded plant which turns red as it matures. Visitors are busy snapping photos with friends in front of a huge bloom of cotton candy.
I thought there would only be silver grass. It's beautiful to see pink muhly grass as well.
Broom cypress is another crowd pleaser. This ornamental plant with bright red leaves spruces up the scene even more.
It's very beautiful here and very special. Yeah, I love it.
The Seoul Silvergrass Festival runs through next Thursday. This year, the festival will stay open until 10 p.m. every night, meaning visitors can enjoy the festival for 2 more hours than usual. However, bear in mind that as this weekend is the only weekend during the festival period, big crowds are expected. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea has been voted onto the UN Human Rights Council, becoming one of 14 new members to earn a seat at the table. The country will have a seat for the 2020 to 2022 term. It's the country's 5th time as a member of the council and the first since the 2016 to 2018 term. The UNHRC consists of 47 member states and is responsible for promoting and protecting human rights around the world. A recent study shows that teenage defectors from North Korea are much more likely to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder or depression compared to their South Korean peers. A study by the University of Konstanz in Germany found that 89% of some 62 teenagers from the north had experienced traumatic incidents. 59% said they suffered famine, forced labor, assault, imprisonment or gang violence. 57% said they'd experienced domestic violence. It's the first time that such a study has been conducted on the mental health and wellness of teenage defectors from the north. Concerns are growing over a harmful chemical found in receipt paper in South Korea. A lawmaker with the Environment and Labour Committee, citing a recent government study, said high levels of the hormone-disrupting chemical bisphenol A were found in nearly half of the samples tested. BPA is used on receipt paper for its stability and high heat resistance. The lawmaker said the samples contained more than 60 times the recommended amount set by the EU. Currently, in Korea, there are no safety standards regarding BPA, which the lawmakers said needs to change. E-cigarette giant Juul is no longer selling certain flavors online, specifically fruity ones. The company said its new policy is effective immediately. The popular e-cigarette firm previously stopped selling the kid-friendly flavors in stores. The Trump administration has announced plans to remove all flavored pods, including mint and menthol, but Juul will continue to sell those flavors online, arguing they may help adults quit smoking.
It was somewhat cloudy in the capital, and some places were even getting autumn showers.
Hopefully, the weather brightens up for the weekend. Let's get more details from our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Now, it was a cloudy day here in Seoul, and we still have a chance of some light rain tonight. Now, unlike the capital, the south and eastern regions have been receiving some rain throughout Friday, which is expected to continue until tomorrow morning. And Saturday afternoon will brighten up, and it'll be under favorable weather. Now, clear autumn skies are expected in the upper regions, whereas the east and the south will have occasional cloud covers during the day. Now, going over to our readings in detail, Seoul will be kicking off the morning to 12 degrees Celsius, and Daegu to 15, Busan 16, and Jeju hitting up to 18 degrees. Now, with all of those showers lifted, the sun will come out and boost up the mercury up into the 20s tomorrow. Seoul, Daejeon, and Daegu, and also for Jeju, will top out to 22 degrees Celsius, and there will be only a few degrees difference for the rest. Now, make sure to dress accordingly for both warm and chilly conditions, as temperature differences are big throughout the day. Now, we'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
OK, that will do it for today's Arirang News Center. Thank you, as always, for watching.
Keep it tuned to Arirang for news in depth coming up next.